Hello, and welcome to our episode of Todd Talks when Todd Talks People Listen. Shh. Hopefully. Today we have the final preview of the final fourth entry in the Kickstarter episodes of Death Battle, and it just so happens to be Among Us versus Fall Guys. Yes, we are finally getting this matchup. This matchup has been desired for years, ever since 2020. And I mean, like, let's be honest, it was 2020. It had to be 2020. So, yeah, we're doing this. And though I have said this in the past, and I apologize, I'm pretty sure this is going to hold this time. This is probably going to be my shortest preview video ever. Because there's honestly not that much to talk about. And I say that because I am not going to do a whole bunch of like, oh, you know what, do this crossover scaling and this crossover scaling and this crossover scaling, or I'm not doing that. I'm not falling into that rabbit hole. That's Death Battle's job. Okay, I will do my best to detail the basic abilities of both the Imposter and the Bean, and then make a guess, because that's basically what this is going to be, because much more than anything else we've done before, this one is absolutely about guessing, because these guys get nuts, especially with their crossovers, and I ain't got the time to, it's like, okay, what's all the outfits that the Bean and the Imposter have, and do they matter, do they scale, what's all the inherent little lore that we don't know about? I don't know. Okay, in fact, I've never played Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout, and I've only played Among Us once, and I was actually with the Death Battle crew. They had a Discord thing, so yeah, you want to do deeper diving, by all means, especially if you're on the Discord, because they're doing it as I speak. But for me, I'm just going to do the basics. I'm going to make my pick, and then I'm going to hope it all works out in my favor. So, let's start out with the Imposter Among Us. Yeah. So, within the lore itself, the Imposter is known as a shape-shifting parasitic alien entity that is from the actual creators of the game Inner Sloth. And they note that somehow this alien being, which we still know very little about within the lore, worked its way onto the ship and then planet and then other ships that the crewmates are a part of. And this parasitic shape-shifting alien entity has a compulsion of sorts to just kill everything that's not it. And yes, sometimes there are multiple imposters among us, depending on the number of people in the game, which is where the balance is, you know. And for those thinking, well, doesn't that sound kind of like The Thing, you know, the horror movie? Exactly. In fact, that's actually another imposter matchup I've been seeing a lot on the Discord. It was like, hey, what if the imposter fought the Thing? And they go, the imposter would win in a landslide. Well, I'm not talking about that one, though. So, being that this alien being has this drive to kill, it obviously needs the skills to kill. I mean, that's just how it works, right? So how does that work? Well, the simple answer is that it has various abilities, both inherent and ones it can take to a certain degree, depending on the map. And it tries to both sabotage and lure the crewmates into a false sense of security. As we noted in the preview, because of the inherent nature of the game, and this is not, oh, it's a gameplay mechanic. No, this is the literal nature of the game. Once the people realize, like, oh, there is an imposter among us, they get paranoid, and the imposter, who can mimic the crewmates almost perfectly, they feed off of that. And then they go forth and try to, you know, screw with them and say, like, oh, it's this person, you know, sus. No. Can you tell I'm having fun today? And they try to, you know, point the finger away from them by doing various things or saying various things. And in the end, they either get caught or they kill everybody. But there's multiple ways that they can kill everybody, and that's a key feature. In fact, there are more than one version of the imposter, as I was reminded during my wiki search. For the standard imposter, like from the early versions of the game, is exactly what you remember. They dress up as the crewmates, and yes, I know that's just their bodies, but I prefer to say it dress up. or shape-shifting, I suppose. Um, they can also be a phantom. They can also be a seeker. They can also be certain other. There's like one other variant. I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was called. Again, I've not played Among Us, but they have various variations that they have, and each one has its own special abilities. Like for example, the phantom can actually be invisible, um, and there was another one that had another ability. It wasn't really that relevant, but each of them can, when they get close to a crewmate, sorry, Baby Yoda, they have various ways of killing them, whether it be through their own physical strength or through weapons. Now, one of the iconic animations is an imposter like literally dancing up to one and like a crew member and slicing them in half, and creating the iconic bones sticking up out of their bodies. But there's more than that. They can literally just snap their necks. They can trip them up and stab them to death. They have guns, and in one of the most unique ones, they have a laser eye that just straight up disintegrates the crewmate. But because the imposter is clever, they also know that they don't technically have to kill them with their own bare hands, which embraces their ability that is technically debatable, but it has been backed up in various lores and gameplay mechanics, which is technomancy, because the imposter can sabotage the ship or base that the crew is on and get win conditions by literally creating a fatal sabotage that does not get corrected in time. The biggest ones are obviously the oxygen, like removing all the air from the ship, especially when you're in deep space. You kind of need oxygen, ladies and gentlemen. And the reactor. It can literally cause the reactor to fail, assumingly causing a massive explosion that blows up the ship or the base, etc., etc. And through technomancy, apparently, it can cause that. And this is backed up by the fact that if there are more than one imposter character on a map, a dead imposter can come back as a phantom, and it can screw with the machines, but it can't kill people. Okay, that's important. Like, it cannot kill as a ghost. So that's, if that was the case, then that would be an instant win for the imposter, because like I could kill you even after I die. That's not what happens. And in fact, there's still some debate about the technomancy, but it doesn't really matter in the end. So yeah, and then that doesn't even count the fact that there are other abilities that it can use to get close to the crew members and kill them, including apparently it has teleportation. Like if you look at the wiki, it specifically states that upon trying to kill a crewmate, it will teleport to the victim and kill him in a split second. Like that's, even though we see like the full animation. Sorry, Baby Yoda. Apparently, to the perspective of the imposter, it only takes a split second. So we're actually seeing it in our view, and our perception of time, whereas the imposter's is much faster. And that actually brings us to another interesting thing, which is what's the scaling between not the costumes but the imposter to the crew members, which is the crew members are strong. How strong is obviously debatable depending on trailers and such, but the imposter is clearly stronger than them, because it can again kill us in a split second. It sees in 1.5 times vision. It has night vision, so if the lights go out, it can see perfectly fine, whereas the crew members actually struggle. Again, it can turn invisible, and it's implied in durability feats that it can survive without oxygen, it can survive lava, it can survive a reactor explosion, and certain other feats. And then in some of the trailers, like for the fungal jungle, we see a crew member get smacked into orbit basically, and then they're fine at the end of the video. So obviously the imposter can scale above that. And then when you think of like an ejection, Todd was not the imposter. Thanks a lot, guys. Sus. Apparently that takes two crew members to do. So whether it's the imposter or the crew member, it takes two of them to toss them out, which is why if you get to the final rounds of the game and there's one imposter and one crew member, the imposter wins, because the crew member on their own cannot beat the imposter. So, yeah, fun times. And then over the course of many updates and maps, there have been numerous crossovers from various franchises, including recently with Miles Edgeworth from the Ace Attorney franchise. When are we gonna get Phoenix Wright versus Saul Goodman or Miles versus Saul Goodman? I'm just saying. And yes, I know we want Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright for real, but. So there's been a lot of costumes and elements and new maps, and there's even like a hide and seek mode where the imposter goes full kill mode and is just trying to find and kill all the crewmates in a certain amount of time. So it has evolved over the years, but the question is, of course, can they beat the Fall Guys? So let's just transition, because it's not sus. It's not sus, so I'm switching over now. The Fall Guys in the Blunder Dome. It's a great name. The Blunder Dome are unique entities, and I say that in reference to not just their creepy skeletal structure, but the fact that we're also comparing them to the imposters. Are lovable, mischievous, optimistic characters that have one goal and one goal only: to go forth and create and have the best possible game fun time ever and get that crown. I do not have a crown on me. I'm actually kind of surprised I don't have a crown. I mean, you think with this hair, I need something to crown my epicness. But the beings, as they are known, are 6 feet tall, suspected by multiple sources. Are 6 feet tall beings with impressive durability, strength, some skill. Not going to go with agility. I mean, let's be honest here. Though they seem agile, they're honestly not. And they're not afraid to give it their all to get to the finish line or screw with you all by knocking you all away. Because remember, it's called Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout. The whole point of the game is that there are like dozens of you, and you have to, wibble wobble and warp your way around these obstacle courses, knocking off people at times so that you can be one of the last ones standing. Like, that's the whole point. Only one can wear the crown. There can be only one. Highlander in Death Battle? Who would Highlander face? Bringing Sean Connery. Yes, I know Sean's dead. But what the thing with these beans is that, like they noted in the preview, they are just so dang durable and resilient. They can survive all sorts of things, including just dying. All right. Now, the difference between Among Us and Fall Guys, in many respects, is that, technically speaking, at the end of every Among Us game, you're playing an entirely new crew. Which we can see with the colors and whatnot. In Fall Guys, you make one bean, and you make one bean, and then you play with that. Almost gonna sound dirty. You use that bean. There you go. You use that bean throughout every match you do, every single one. So that, and you can customize them. You can dress them up in various costumes, and so et cetera, et cetera. And then as later seasons came out, they got not just new costumes, but new abilities, including the ability to create your own levels. I remember when that came out, because that was actually a big deal, because players have been asking for that for a while. So you build your own engineering challenges, see how well other players could do in your game, and et cetera, et cetera. So, and then, yes, they are made by Epic Games, which means they are indeed in Fortnite, and apparently they allegedly get Fortnite scaling, but apparently so does Among Us. So, what does it really mean? Again, I'm not going to do the crossover scaling. I am not diving down that rabbit hole. That is Death Battle's job, all right? I am just here for light amusement. I will say that despite having some potentially absolutely insane durability feats, the beans have a few inherent weaknesses that cannot be ignored. For example, by their nature, even though they seem, supernatural in their abilities at times, they're actually dang clumsy. I mean, that's the point of the game, is that you're, wibbling and wobbling through there, and you're trying, and you're bouncing off one another's characters and beans, and that leads to you, falling off. and they fall down quite a bit. And according to one wiki, I think it might have been like one of the death battle wikis that I looked up for this. And no, obviously didn't have the result, but one of the wikis said that they only run like 10 miles an hour, which makes sense because if they were super speed, that would make the game kind of pointless. And clearly they are not. They and the obstacles are now going like hundreds and thousands of miles per hour, so they're very slow in general. They're slow. They're not very steady on their feet, and that leads to their clumsiness because they fall all the time. But because they're so durable, it kind of doesn't matter. It's like the the beanbag toy where you punch it and it moves a lot. You it gets knocked down, but it always gets back up again. That's basically what the bean is. And because of that, they take all these different kinds of abuses, including mimicking some things from Among Us. I almost said Among Guys. That's about the name of the episode. Among Us, and so it's very hard to judge who they are, what they are, and yes, the whole skeletal thing. Okay, I want to know about the skeletal thing. So yes, that was an official tweet. Yes, that is allegedly real, but there's also an alternate tweet from the Fall Guys devs who state that there was another concept art, and they show it, and it's very much a more simplistic model where there is no skeleton. There's just like a little heart in the middle. So, yeah. Also, one of the devs said that if the bean wanted to, because it's 6 feet tall and has technically super strength, it does have super strength. I want to know that there was a golden egg that it lifted at one point in the game, and that's apparently 5 tons. Like an actual gold egg, like how Mario with the golden chain jump. Same thing, but much smaller, and thus it lifted up, and it was about 5 tons, which is obviously impressive. So, yeah, this bean is more durable than you think, and even if we discount the Big Bang feat, which I have a feeling Death Battle is going to do because of how they kind of shrugged off that and Meteor feat. It has the Meteor feat, which can be many kilotons of TNT, depending on how you want to scale it. Of course, the big question, and this goes back to the infamous Death Battle cast, which is anything that happens in Fall Guys real? Because, as noted on one of the wikis, on the official wikis, the only actual living things that we see in the game world, or in the world in general, are the Fall Guys. There's one trailer, Season 3, Chapter 3, whatever, that shows other living entities, but the only other living things we see are the beans. Everything else is mechanical, which implies, as noted in the Death Battle cast, that things might not actually be real, and thus all of the crossover items and scaling does not matter and does not work because it's all a game show. Versus Among Us, which is obviously very, very real. It's real death. So, make of that what you will. Make of that what you will. Alright, so, see, look at that. We're only on 18 minutes. So who wins in a fight between the Fall Guys and the Among Us crew? Well, this is where it gets weird, because if you remember the very small preview we saw at the end of Baosei, which, by the way, thank you everyone for watching that so many times. Yes, it is still peak. I've watched it well over a dozen times in the first week. I feel confident saying that, a dozen times. But 3 million views. Thank you for that. Let's do that again with Among Us versus Fall Guys. This is where it gets weird, because I've seen a whole bunch of, especially after the Fall Guys preview dropped, people saying oh, Fall Guys is gonna win because they are getting scaled to Big Bang, but the people are like, wait a minute, but Among Us scales to faster than light, and what about this? What about this? What about this? And one phrase I keep seeing popping up is that this is a case of an irresistible force versus an immovable object, which actually feels accurate, because while the Imposter is not perfect, obviously it can get ejected, it can be thrown off the ship, it can be manhandled by the crewmates and thrown out. That doesn't mean that it's, inherently doomed so long as people are smart enough, or the crewmates are smart enough. That's not how it works. Likewise, just because the bean is clumsy as heck doesn't mean it's easily going to die. Obviously not if it can tank a meteor. I'm very curious about how the battle itself is going to look, because they show it on an Among Us map. All right, we see that at the end of the preview. So I'm curious about how that's going to go. Second, it really is a case of, can the imposter kill the bean, and what can the bean do to the imposter? And the reason I say this is that even with all the crossover powers and abilities, what it really boils down to is their natural abilities and weaponry. And the beans naturally do not have weaponry. That's why I didn't dive into the crossover stuff, because everybody's like, oh, they get Doctor Who scaling, or they get like Street Fighter scaling, and it's like, they don't use the powers. Okay, this isn't like Fortnite, where you can dress your character up as Deku and suddenly use, all for one. Or become Goku and shoot a Kamehameha wave, or become John Wick and be the ultimate killing machine that's totally should have beat James Bond. Grunge. That's not how it works. The beans have no natural weaponry. They rely on their durability and their uncanny strength. Again, 5 tons at minimum. And you think, well, wouldn't that be enough to defeat the imposter? Maybe. But if the scaling from the Among Us preview is correct, and they can react and move at things faster than light, and remember, the imposter is definitely higher scaling than the crewmates who can do the faster than light meteor shooting, then technically you could argue that the beam cannot even touch the imposter. And then there's the imposter shapeshifting abilities, where there are... Oh, that was it. One of the other imposter ones was impersonating crewmates who have actually died. Like, it'll assume their bodies instead of just taking its own. Anyway, but yeah, there's shapeshifting ability. We've seen the imposter in certain cases, like, shapeshift its body in certain ways to where, it could obviously be even more menacing, including splitting its own body in half and shooting its tongue out to impale the crewmate in the head, which it totally could obviously do to the bean in theory. So it's weird because the bean, even at the lower end of the scaling, obviously has super durability, but you could argue that the imposter has incredible strength and actual killing experience. That's the other thing. While we don't never see a bean die, we also don't see beans kill. Okay, yes, even them knocking off the stage, wibbling and wobbling and all that, that's not like killing experience, that's just playing the game. Versus the imposter, which is, I am here to kill you, I'm going to kill you, that it's that kind of thing. So that's different. And so while I will acknowledge that it's probably gonna be dang tough for the imposter to kill the bean, I don't know if the bean could even catch up to the imposter to try and kill it. And then there's the other problem with the beans, which is, again, they're so dang clumsy, and one of the kills of the imposter is really just tripping up the foe and blasting them with a gun or obliterating them with a laser, in which disintegration is disintegration. As long I would be stunned if that didn't work on a bean. Could the bean resist it? Absolutely. I don't know. Again, like, the crossover scaling is nuts. So what this really boils down to is, who the heck is going to get a kill shot? All right? Because if the beans can canonically only move like 10 miles an hour, then the imposter is way faster. All right? But as we saw in Bardock versus Omni-Man, speed isn't always the biggest factor here. And so you could argue that if the Fall Guy was to get their hands on the imposter, they could theoretically rip them in half, which more than likely could kill them. I don't know. It could be a tie. I don't know. But if I was to pick, and I am going to pick, I am picking the imposter and the Among Us crew, because between their invisibility, between their sabotaging ability, which could mess with any constructs that the Fall Guys create to change the course in their favor, which they brought that up for a reason. They're totally not going to use it. Not going to use that in the fight. They're going to make this work, and the imposter will like slowly pick apart all the things that make the bean capable in any way, and then they're just going to trip them up and blast them. Not sus at all. So yeah, I'm picking the imposter to win this fight, but if it's a tie, I'm also claiming victory, because this is just weird. This is going to be weird, and I'm looking forward to it with all I got. So, with that, I'm ending this episode of Todd Talk. Who do you think is going to win in between Among Us and Fall Guys, and why, and how, and do you believe the crossover scaling? Let me have it in the comments. Yeah, this is going to be interesting, ladies and gentlemen, and it'll be a great way to end 2024 and the return of Death Battle. So, I thank you for watching. You made it as far. I know you were listening, and I'll see you around.